für de lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich date gern habe, du bist dabei. Maria geht fort mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, wann ich geh. Ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watch sehen. Hab kriegt mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du scheinst da, als mir finden kann. Es hat Maria und Dale ganz wunderbar. Als ich dir den weiße dann, wann ich geh, wann ich geh. Ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watch sehen.
Well, Gouda Obit Liebe I. Good evening, dear friends. We are back for another episode of PA Dutch Live. It is the December 2024 edition. This is it. Last month, boys and girls, Jungs und Mädels, Buben und Mates, before we spring into the new year in 2025. I don't know where 24 went. It all the way went around again, didn't it? Hey, if this is the first time that you're joining us here on the show, welcome, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch. Welcome. If this is your 35th time joining us, I'm still going to say the same thing. Welcome to you as well. If you're joining us either on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook page, PA Dutch 101, please, in the comment section, tell us where you are joining us from. I love to give shout outs to people out there in YouTube land and also in Facebook land. We have a couple people already that have put some stuff in the comment section. So please do that if you haven't already. Titus Keller says, PA Dutch from Buffalo Springs, Lebanon, Condi, now living in the Mitten. I take it that to be Michigan, Titus. Thanks for joining us from the great state of Michigan. We also have Ed Cohen from Delaware joining us. Our good friend Norman Jung stayed up after midnight. Gouda Obit aus dem Alderland. Good evening from the old country. It's not Christmas until PA Dutch Live. December is over. Boy, you got that right, Norman. Do you have your Christmas tree up? Are you all ready for the Belschnickel over there in Steinbach am Glan there in the Rhineland-Palatinate? Thanks for staying up. I always appreciate it, Norman. Our good friend Dolly Moore joins us every month. Hello from Fleetwood, PA in beautiful Berks County. Dolly, if you're going to be in church on Christmas Eve, I'll be looking for you. Make sure you say hi to me. We got all those candles lit. Bill aus Dillsburg, Gouda Obit, Ali Eppo, and Hallicher Grischtdaag. Hey, Hallicher Grischtdaag to dia all. Bill, good to have you joining us as you do almost every month. Our also good friend, the Wiswessers, good evening from Ruska Manor Township there in beautiful Berks County. Rachel, thanks. And all the Wiswessers there, thank you for joining us. Archaic Preo joining us from Flemington, Pennsylvania. Well, that's in Clinton County up here in central Pennsylvania. I know where that is. And we also have Kathy Kroll joining us from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So good to have you with us, Kathy. We also have Riley G joining from my house. Well, thanks, Riley. I'd love to know where your house actually is. That'd be great. And Derek Keller, hello von Windgap. Wie bist? Hey, ich bin all recht. I am okay. Windgap, you joined us before as well, Derek. It's good to have you. If you haven't told us where you're from, Dunavetta, you gotta let us know. Oh, our dear friend Erica Gustafson. Hey, Doug, glad to be watching from Bucks County. That is great to have us. Thank you so much, Erica. Boy, have I been getting a lot of positive comments on that video I shared of your new band, The Shoe Flies. We got to keep that music going, and I look forward to the day that we can all play together sometime. That would be awesome. If you haven't already, let us know where you are joining us from. As always, I got a couple announcements for everybody here. Oh, real quick, Andy, hallo aus der Pals aus Landau. This is my good friend Andy joining us from Landau, a city in the Palatinate region of Germany. He also stayed up after midnight. Boy, thanks for doing that, Andy. I really appreciate it. A couple things about the show tonight, excuse me. Yes, it is our December episode, and waiting in the green room is Dr. Karen Guenther, and we'll get to her in a minute, and her talk about 18th century religion in the Oley Valley. Boy, is it an exciting topic. Oh, we got some other people joining us real quick. Hey, shout out to my brother, Steve, joining us from beautiful Centerport in Berks County. Steve, good to have you. Hope your lovely wife is sitting there on the couch with you. Our distant cousin, Carol Diefenbach-Kanner, joining us from chilly Burnville. Hey, Carol, it's going to get even colder. Get ready. Get a couple more blankets out. We got some interesting stuff to share with you guys. Mark your calendars, things like that, as we always do. This month's episode is brought to us by the good people at the Gosh and Hoppen Historians. They have a brand new book out and is available, How We Ate by Alan G. Kaiser. That's a name a lot of people that are affiliated with Pennsylvania Dutch Studies would recognize. It is 40 years worth of research. The book just came out, 600 pages, 3,000 citations. I haven't had a chance to see a physical copy yet, but I will be getting one. You too can get one available through the Gosh and Hoppens. You can check out their website and their Facebook page to learn more, but it is truly the tome right now, I think, on how the Pennsylvania Dutch ate in our early years in the 1700s, which is the time period we're going to be talking about tonight with our guest, up until 1830, as the book cover says there. So that's a new one for you guys to get out there. Maybe put it on might be a little late for Christmas, but you can still maybe get it in time. Also, we have another book that's also available. I announced this last month, but it's still available. Our new poetry book by Michael Kenneth Clay and myself, Heimkomen, Homecoming, a collection of 23 new poems in English and in Pennsylvania Dutch. Both of these poems, or both of the sets are in one book, and that is available through Mastove Press for the low price of $9.99. You can't beat that. It's a great read. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people that have already picked up the book. So if you're interested in modern poetry with a Pennsylvania Dutch bent, even if you know the language or not, because all the poems are also in English, check out our new book, Heimkomen, Homecoming, available through Mastove Press. Oh, our good friend Christopher Malone joining us from just under the Oley Valley in Trapp. Christopher, it's great to have you joining us, and shout out to the continued good work that you and Lisa are doing there at Historic Trapp. Keep it up, my friend. Keep it up. Christian is joining us. Hello from Pennsylvania. Well, that's great. And Sage says, hi, it's Sage. Well, there we go. Thanks, Sage, for joining us. Much appreciated. One other thing you might want to add to your shopping cart, you probably, if you make the trip to Morgantown and to Mastove Press, you can pick up a copy of the new Pennsylvania Dutch calendar for 2025. This is produced through the help of the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown. This year's calendar is the theme Mir lebe und schaffe auf die Bauerei. We live and work on the farm. And it is available, like I said, through Mastove Press. You can get that mailed right to your house. Pick up a copy of that and Heimkomen when you get on that Mastove website, or go in person to the store. It's a great little store to check out. I want to teach you two quick phrases in Pennsylvania Dutch for those of you that are learning Pennsylvania Dutch that are apropos for the next week and a half coming up here in the calendar. If you want to wish somebody a Merry Christmas in Pennsylvania Dutch, it's these two words: Hallicher Grischtdaag. Hallicher Grischtdaag. Merry Christmas, or Happy Christmas, as the Pennsylvania Dutch say. So there's a phrase for you to use. And since the following week is New Year and you want to wish somebody a Happy New Year, here's another Pennsylvania Dutch phrase for you: Halliches Najaar. Halliches Najaar. Halliches Najaar. So now you got both Merry Christmas, Hallicher Grischtdaag, and Halliches Najaar, which is Happy New Year, to add to your vocabulary. Every month, I give a hee-haw style salute to some town in the greater Pennsylvania Dutch area of Pennsylvania. And this month, we give that shout out to the town of Pikeville, little old Pikeville in the Oley Valley. It's the reason I chose that, in Berks County. Pikeville, if you blink and you're through it, so you got to be careful when you're driving down there in the Oley Valley. You might come across Pikeville, you see the signs for it, but you got to keep your eyes open. Founded 1813, and a population of 1,700 people there in beautiful rural southern Berks County. Check out Pikeville the next time you're driving through the Oley Valley. And I think it's time to get into our discussion on the Oley Valley. This month, we're very happy to welcome Dr. Karen Guenther. She is a professor of history at Mansfield University. Well, let me make it correct. The Mansfield campus of the Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania. There was a merger a little bit of time ago between Lock Haven University, Mansfield University, and Bloomsburg. They are now Commonwealth University, and Dr. Guenther is at the Mansfield campus. And we invited her tonight to talk about a topic that she has researched, religion in the Oley Valley in the 18th century, in the 1700s. So let me pull that out and bring her in. Hello, Dr. Guenther. Karen, how are you this evening?
I'm doing okay. I'm kind of chuckling because I kind of know how old that picture is. Let's just say it's not even my most recent official photo from the university, and that was done about 7 years ago.
That's all right.
Better in the photo. So
Karen, I always like to start each conversation out with just asking my guests. So, do you have any Pennsylvania Dutch connection? Are you, is there
Oh
Pennsylvania
my.
Dutch in your family? Well, tell us, please.
Oh, okay. Well, first off, let's see. My mother grew up in a bilingual household, and that her parents spoke Pennsylvania Dutch at home. And one of my, I don't want to say fondest memories, but one of my memories is they would be watching a Phillies game on TV. And when the Phillies weren't playing well, they would just start talking Dutch. I had no clue what they were saying because, I grew up in the city and all that kind of stuff. And my mother could understand it, but she doesn't speak it. And it took them till she was pretty much an adult till they realized she could understand it when she was explaining to my uncle what they were talking about. But let's see. If we're focusing on the Oley Valley, we can go back to, let's see, the Kimes, the Bertolets coming in, the Bechthels. My direct connection to the Oley Valley, I guess, would be my ancestor Casper Spohn, who actually Rachel knows about, because he was a Hessian prisoner of war who was captured at Saratoga. And then after the war was over, the Hessian prisoners were given a choice of, you can go back with the army or you can, in a sense, defact. And he chose to stay in Pennsylvania because people spoke German like he did. And there was one account in a Montgomery County history where they're writing about one of his descendants, and they mentioned that he did not want people to call him a Hessian. He wasn't a Hessian because Hessians were bad.
Understandable given the time and the history of that.
Given the time and the history.
Story.
I mean,
yeah,
he was like 18 when he was more or less drafted to fight and then sent off to fight. And it's like his prince pretty much sold him to George III to go fight against the Americans. And I guess
ended
the
up
Oley
here,
Valley looked like where he was from. And I don't know if his parents or his family ever heard from him again.
Yeah, right.
But it's kind of like, it's the kind of story that the Oley Valley is all about. It's a place that attracts people, and for a variety of reasons.
So that's a great transition, Karen. And you studied this era of history and specifically the Oley Valley. Just a real quick question: what got you interested in wanting to study this?
Well, when I was working on my master's degree at Penn State, I did my master's thesis on religious diversity in Reading during the 18th century, and I was taking a colonial America class and had to write a research paper, and I was done with my thesis. And I kind of actually over term break, because we were on quarter system back then, I went back to the Historical Society of Berks County and went to their library and was starting to look around for a topic. And I'm going, hey, this looks kind of interesting. How many churches were there? Oh my God. And it depends on how you define the Oley Valley, because it's more than Oley Township. I mean, some description had it going all the way up to, Colebrookdale, some all the way down to Amity, and then west to, almost to Rusca Manor. And I'm going, that seems a little broad for the Oley Valley. So I try to focus more on like Oley, Pike, Exeter, Earl townships and so forth. With you kind of have to get into where the Catholics were, because the priests did come down to Oley to perform various duties. Then I went to the prof of the class and I said, okay, well, how does this sound for a topic? Would it fit in with the scope of the course? And he goes, sure, go do it. And so I just wrote a paper on religious diversity in the Oley Valley in the 18th century, not knowing what I would find. And later finding out that I'm related to some of these people. It's one of those, wow.
Yeah.
But it just seems so fascinating, because you talk about religious diversity in Pennsylvania, and the Oley Valley is such a microcosm of that, because chances are, if you, I mean, except for the women in the wilderness kind of thing down in Wissahickon, if you were in Pennsylvania and you were a religious, I don't want to say crackpot, because that kind of has a different connotation, but if you were someone who was not traditional, you probably were in the Oley Valley.
Well, let's dig into this topic a little bit. So,
Okay.
you want to talk first about, tell us a bit about the people that came to the Oley Valley.
Well, it's mostly from basically what I would call Central Europe, France, because they were fleeing because of the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, along with the Palatinate area of present-day Germany, so we more or less the western part, along with Switzerland. And they would come through either Rotterdam or Amsterdam, more likely Rotterdam. So sometimes they were then called Dutch. But because of the Navigation Acts, they then went to England before coming to Philadelphia. And depending on when they arrived, there might be a record of them actually arriving in Philadelphia. They really didn't start keeping much of a record until 1727, when the legislature, the governor actually decided, it might be a good idea to keep track of who's coming and make sure they're willing to swear loyalty to the king, which at that time was George II. And it's like these people are so happy to be away from areas that were being torn up by war, bad weather, and stuff like that, that they're sure we'll swear loyalty to this new king, which became a bit of an issue in the 1770s, but that's a later story. But there were also Swedes coming into the Douglasville area. So that's why I have the German and Swedish Lutherans, that eventually the Swedish Lutherans pretty much converted to Church of England. And as a result, that's why I'm trying to think of the name of the church in Douglasville now. But that church started out as Swedish Lutheran, and briefly Muhlenberg was there as a German Lutheran, because at least it's Lutheran. But eventually they became Anglican, just like the others. I mean, they would have Anglican missionaries come who were paid by the government to provide services to people of the Church of England. And there weren't that many of them in Berks County. There were more in Douglasville than there were in, or what was Morlaton back then, than there were in Reading, because Reading was about 90% German. And then the Reform, you have the French Reform, where the Huguenots who had fled because of change in policy, shall we say, by Louis XIV. And some were Swiss, some were German. English and Welsh Quakers, who would be involved in starting what's now known as Exeter Meeting. But when it was first started, it was Oley Meeting, because it was located in Oley Township, and then Exeter was formed out of Oley. German Dunkards, also known as Brethren. Today, they're Church of the Brethren. Mennonites, Amish, the Newborn, who are, we'll get to them.
We'll get to them, yeah.
We'll get to them. And then, of course, Roman Catholics, where, again, the priest was at Gashahapen, which is now Bally. But they would come out and perform various ministerial duties, like baptisms, in the Oley region. So, and it would be noted that they were baptized in Oley, that they wouldn't go to church to be baptized. They would actually, the priest would come to you, not you go to them. And one thing is that people kind of got amused by the religious diversity, particularly in Berks County. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't as diverse in the western part, in the Tulpehocken region, as it was in the east. And in fact, Gottlieb Middleberger, who's kind of one of the more famous people who wrote about what it was like in Pennsylvania, how horrible the trip was. And then he tells about wonderful things about Pennsylvania. And then he goes back and writes all about it. And with the idea being it's going to stop people from coming. And they're going, hey, this sounds better than what I've got, so I'm keep coming. But he would talk about it in one house. Among one family, you can meet 4 or 5 or 6 different sects. Sects being religious groups. That's one of those things you kind of have to clarify when talking. I have to write the word on the board when I teach Pennsylvania history. This is nothing to do with, well, no, it isn't.
Yeah, no, right. It is crazy to think about how such a small area as the Oley Valley is to have such a diversity, especially at this time period. I mean, think of most people, maybe have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that you could be going from house to house and meeting. It could be a Quaker, it could be a Swiss Reform, could be a German Lutheran. It's really unbelievable that this valley became such a collecting point for all of these different groups of people in that sense.
And I left out the Moravians.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going.
All right, so
transition.
Yeah, I don't know, wave.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened is like people who are, oh, there's a typo. That's going to be Gottlieb with a B, not a V. That's what happens when you do it after coming home from the hospital. Spangenberg was a bishop of the Moravian Church, worked with Zinzendorf up in Bethlehem, and he would be one of many people who would talk about this kind of religious chaos they would see in the Oley Valley. And he would say that if you're not part of an established religion, then you're part of the Pennsylvanian religion. In other words, if you're not a regular churchgoer, you're, quote, unchurched in a sense, you still have faith because you're a Pennsylvanian. And it's kind of this whole idea that not everybody fits in with the norm.
Yeah.
And it happens for a variety of reasons. It could be that there is no Lutheran church in the area, or there is no Reformed church in the area, or there is a church, but there isn't a minister. And as a result, what do you do? And this, by the way, will be where the Moravians would come in and say, hey, come worship with us. We'll take you in. It's also where the Quakers, in contrast, they didn't do a whole lot of proselytizing. They weren't out there converting the natives or anything like that. They were more likely to kick you out if you misbehaved, like some of the Boones did, than they were to try to recruit new members, which is kind of, people look at that and they're going, huh? Why weren't you trying to get more people? Well, they wanted to get people who fit into faith. And for the Quakers, it was, if you're, we will disown you. We will excommunicate you. Now, if you confess your sins, we might let you back. And some of that happened during the Revolution where, oh my God, they paid the tax to support the war effort. Shame on you. And they're going, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. I realized the error of my ways and stuff like that. But anyway, we can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Again, some of the problems these early settlers faced, you're coming, you're settling, you're building your farm, you're establishing your iron furnace or your sawmill or whatever. And you want to go to church, but where do you go? Eventually you have enough people that you can get together and build a church, but then you need someone to be your preacher. And there was a scarcity of ministers in Pennsylvania. I mean, think about it. You're graduating from a university in Germany, and here are your job opportunities. And, if you're a really high quality minister, coming to Pennsylvania, which would involve, again, this trek across the ocean and so forth, isn't exactly a high priority. It's like, well, I'll see what I can get back here in Germany. And as a result, when you get ministers, they're not always the highest quality. What this also means is that you have people who more or less they can read and write. Boom, you are now a schoolmaster. If you're a schoolmaster, you could then read a printed text to the congregation. You could read like someone else's sermon. And eventually it evolves to you performing clerical duties like baptisms, conducting funerals, performing wedding ceremonies, and so forth. You're doing the job of a clergyman, but you're not ordained, which once they start organizing the Reformed Church and the Lutheran Church became a problem for those people who were more or less traditional, established, want people to be ordained. And here you have these clergy out there doing things that really they want regular pastors to do who have been, given theological training. What this also means is that the sectarians who don't necessarily have regular clergy, like the Dunkards, like the Mennonites, later like the Moravians, you have a chance to worship God. So, it may not be Reformed, but at least I go to church. That's the thing. You go to church, even if you are not of that faith. And over time, this really alarms particularly the Lutheran and Reformed church leaders who say, okay, we got to get ministers in here. And unfortunately, they're more likely than send these ministers to Reading than they are to the Oley Valley. But they would get some who would be relatively stable in the Oley Valley. But again, you're trying to go ahead. The next slide. All right, so we take a look at when some of these churches were organized. You have the Reformed who have organized, I think it's now Salem Reformed. It's also been known as Oley Reformed. Back in 1735, they actually build a church building. They have a cemetery. And the last time I was there, they had expanded the church building, which resulted in the relocation of some of the interred. And then they had a little memorial section off to the side where they put the tombstones for the people they had
moved,
relocated.
Yeah, right.
For lack of a better word, which is kind of interesting, and because some of my ancestors are among those who were in the memorial list. You have the Lutherans organizing St. Joseph's of Hill Church in the 1740s. You have the priests at Gashahapen performing baptism in Oley, and they were started in the 1740s. Mennonites are actually sending members to Mennonite conferences by the 1720s. The Dunkards would erect a church in the 1730s. The Moravians become active in the 1740s. And it's just, again, this hotbed of all these religious groups in this one area.
Yeah. And, it's funny because, like you said, I'm thinking about this as we're looking at these dates, and there were people in the Oley Valley before the 1730s and the 1740s. And it must have been like it was like the Wild West. You could, there was no established or built churches yet. I can understand why, what you talked about, how some people were just hungry for the ability to maybe sing hymns or, also the sense that they knew that if they weren't worshiping, the whole aspect of maybe God isn't happy with them and all these things, trying to please God. And I can see people are going to do whatever they can to take care of that need, that desire. And, but then as time progresses and as these churches establish themselves, then I think it becomes a little bit more easier for these people then to figure out, well, I can go to St. Joseph's Church or the Hill Church or whatever, and do what I, get the Lutheran service that I was raised in or baptized in or, whatever. But or before that, I can see.
Yeah. Or even if you're Reformed, you would go to St. Joseph's because at least you're getting a message.
Right.
And that's the thing. A lot of areas only didn't necessarily have this as much. You would have what they called union churches, where you would have like the Lutherans and the Reformed share a building.
Yep.
And then you would have like alternate weeks. You would have a Lutheran minister come, and then the next week it'd be the Reformed minister, and so forth. And that you would have worship services every week, but it wouldn't be the same. And as my prof put it for the Colonial America class, the main difference was whether or not you have Unser Vater or Vater Unser in the Lord's Prayer. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah.
It's kind of like, there really wasn't a whole lot of difference.
Yeah.
Other than just simple wording. It's like Holy Spirit versus Holy Ghost kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as a result, I mean, like I said, I'm thinking back as I go through, times. The earliest I know definitely had farm in the area was Joost Yoder.
Yeah.
Who was a Lutheran. And you think most of the Yoders were Amish, but he was from the Lutheran Yoders versus the Amish Yoders. And
yeah.
And as a result, it's kind of like you go where you can find it. And if that meant going to a Mennonite service, you feel better because you've experienced God that week.
Right. Well, and then there was the example that we're about to talk about, where these groups that went out on their own, so to speak. So
yeah, they were a little different. Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about the newborns.
Okay, the newborn were a rather interesting group. Matthias Baumann was a German immigrant who, I guess one way to put it, had an religious experience. We'll put it kind of politely, and saw himself as a sense the second coming of Christ.
Yep.
The kind of, and of course, this obviously did not go over well with the traditional religious leaders, particularly in the Reformed Church, and as a result, you have him coming along. He begins preaching in Oley. And again, this is in like it's 1719, 1720. And this is a time when they don't have a whole lot of churches. And here's this guy coming along preaching. And people get interested. Oh boy, we get to hear the word of God. And he would promulgate his religious beliefs in Ein Ruf an die Nicht-Wiedergeborenen, a call to the unregenerate. Yeah, there's another typo that creeped in. And I'm sorry,
that's okay.
But he even offered a way to cross the Delaware River to prove that he was basically the second coming of Christ. Well, he died before achieving that goal. No, he didn't drown. And by the way, he's one of my ancestors. So one time when I was talking about these people afterwards, one of the listeners in the group said, you ought to be careful about these people because, there might be some descendants in there who might take offense. I'm going, Matthias Baumann is, I forget how many, it's like his 7th or 8th great grandfather. And let me just say, I didn't know that when I first came across him. Yeah. And I'm going, this guy's a nut job. And then from the line that he comes from on my side, in a way he fits. But anyway.
Well, full disclosure, everybody, Matthias Baumann is my 8th great grandfather as well. So Dr. Guenther and I are distant cousins in some way. How many removed and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. But you're right. There weren't a lot of families in the Oley Valley at this time period, and the ones, names that you've said already, like the Yoders, like the Spanglers, like the Bertelmans, the Bedelmans, the Bechtels, all these, the Hochs as well, which is what I descend from, and the one daughter of the Hoch, the one son of the Hoch family that immigrated, married Matthias. Matthias Baumann only had one child; it was a daughter, and my relative married his daughter, and then of course then had children, and I'm a direct line descendant of this guy. And the first time I came across his story, because I hadn't heard it either growing up, and I was just like, oh my gosh, you said nut job, and it's a good way. Like this group really, like the stuff he preached was really radical. Like, I mean, really radical. You couldn't, like, if you joined this group, like you couldn't do anything wrong in the eyes of God. You had been born again in that sense. And oh my gosh, unbelievable some of the stuff that he said. And there were multiple church leaders, and I'm sure you saw this in your research, that attacked him pretty verbally for what he was doing and what he was preaching as sacrilege, right?
Yeah, I mean, Reverend George Michael Weiss would actually write a treatise. I forget the name of the treatise, but he would actually publish a pamphlet that, in a sense, was basically attacking every point of Baumann's preaching. And of course, it's also this is done after his death, so he's also attacking the guy who replaced Baumann, and basically try to refute the heresies of this sect. Yeah. And it's kind of like written as a dialogue between a minister and a representative, and he calls this person who represents the newborn a miserable earthly worm. So the established clergy do not like him.
And Spangenberg would come to Oley. The group didn't last very long either after his death, correct?
No, about a decade.
Yeah.
But Spangenberg preached a sermon in which he indicated that the fallacies of the sect's unevangelical doctrines, and it says it's when Spangenberg started attacking them, that's when they started on decline. But I mean, the clergy would talk about this turbulent sect, a terrible group of men, and it's like, let's just say they weren't popular outside their little group.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
But he thought he could walk across the Delaware, everybody. He thought he could walk across the Delaware, but he didn't.
That's right. And this one had water in it, not wait until it's all dry and then walk across it.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk about another group that was really popular in the Oley Valley as well.
Yes, the Moravians. They actually would fill in a hole because of the lack of Reformed and Lutheran ministers. And as a result, they were, I'm trying to think. If anything, they were more traditional than the newborn. I mean, they built a schoolhouse that still existed in the early 20th century because I've seen photos of it, but I don't think it's still there anymore. But it was more or less a missionary site because, again, they were based primarily in Bethlehem and then Blitz in Lancaster County. But Henry Antes in particular he was actually Reformed, and he converted to Moravian, and he would occasionally visit private homes and conduct worship services, preaching as a Moravian. And Spangenberg would come visit. And with the Great Awakening, the Moravians were able to fill a void that the Reformed and Lutherans couldn't, because, again, they don't have the big leaders yet. I mean, they have John Philip Boehm for the Reformed, but he's pretty much starting out mostly, again, in the Philadelphia area. Muhlenberg doesn't arrive until the 1740s, and by the end of the 1740s, both the Lutherans and the Reformed have established organizations that are more or less like a denominational organization for Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York, which all had significant German populations. Not so much New Jersey or Delaware, but it's particularly New York. And it's like the Lutherans, it was the Ministerium. For the Reformed, it was the Cetus. And what happens is that they're doing this to combat the Moravians, because the Moravians are coming in and they are filling in the gaps again where the Lutherans and Reforms weren't. There's like a big problem in Tulpehocken area about this. And they would actually have some things that wouldn't be settled until the 1830s. In Oley, it was more or less, again, they're stepping in. But one thing about the Moravians is that Zinzendorf had this grand idea that why do we need all of these religious groups? And he actually organized conferences in which his goal was to create one denomination, what he called the Pennsylvania Congregation of God and the Spirit. That it would be blending together the Lutheran, the Reformed, the Moravian, the Dunkards, the Amish, the Mennonite, and so forth, Schwenkfelders, into one big religious group. Well, it starts out with the first meeting they baptize a few natives. Seems relatively harmless. The second meeting, they baptize a few more natives. Seems rather harmless. At the third meeting, which would be held at John DeTurk's farm in the Oley Valley, all of a sudden, the Dunkards realized how they were baptizing the natives. By sprinkling. That's not how the Dunkards do it. And so you start to see a split over how you baptize people. And ultimately, this idea, hold on a second. Just got the notice that my battery needs to be juiced. All right, here we go. Okay, and as a result, it starts with little things like how do you baptize people, and ultimately it just all blows up. That you cannot get one group because there are so many differences among the different groups. Yeah. If you can lump the sectarians together, and these are the people who sprinkle or who dunk, immerse, rather than the Lutherans and Reformed and the Catholics who sprinkle. But the whole idea again is that this was the deal breaker for Zinzendorf's goal of having one religious group for Pennsylvania, because he thought, it was, let's have it all together. Make this easy. Didn't work too well. And of course, they established schools. And one of the schools that they would have in the Oley Valley would be the Moravian school. Because the other denominations weren't organized enough to have a school. Because again, religion is pretty much what today we would call parochial schools. The idea that your minister would often serve as a schoolmaster, or the schoolmaster would serve as the minister. But again, it's something that they were particularly active in trying to educate people. And of course, as part of your education, you want to be able to read and write the Bible. Read the Bible and write your name and so forth. So, okay, next slide. And then there are the Quakers. we did allow a few English in. They pretty much, again, were on their own. They kept separate from the Germans. You don't have Germans joining Exeter meeting. I do know of one instance in which they married a German and were immediately disowned because he was a schoolmaster. But what started out as Oley meeting actually started in 1725. They were part of a meeting in Montgomery County, well, Philadelphia County at the time, Montgomery now. And they built a meeting house and were officially established as Oley Monthly Meeting in 1737. They would report to the Philadelphia meeting, which was kind of like their regional group. And then in 1742, when Exeter Township is formed out of Oley, they became Exeter Monthly Meeting. It's predominantly English and Welsh at this monthly meeting. They had other branches and up in Maiden Creek, which included some Irish, and then down in Robinson Township too, that all kind of, in a sense, reported back for the monthly meeting. They would have their like weekly meetings there. The Quakers were pretty much, they were there. They weren't too active. And it's like, again, it's where the English would go unless they would travel down to present-day Douglasville to St. Gabriel's, I remember the name, to go to worship. But that's it for the Quakers. I mean, it's again, it's another example of, and the Quakers were there too. I actually wrote my dissertation on the Exeter meeting and tried to fit it in and said, okay, here you have this English meeting, this group of English in an area that's pretty much 90% plus German. So they're already kind of like out there. They're along the frontier. And so, everything that had been pretty much written about the Quakers before then was Philadelphia, Chester, Bucks County, where there were a lot of English speakers. And I said, here are these people along the frontier. And let's just say, when the Indians start attacking your house, you think twice about, do I really want to stay a pacifist? And some chose not to. And in a couple of cases died anyway. So, okay, next slide. So what you see in the Oley Valley is you definitely have more religious diversity in this region than you have in Philadelphia. One minister would say it's the haunt of the wildest and most unruly people and sects. And there's another glitch that came in. I need to proofread better. But again, you've got pretty much anybody who was in Pennsylvania, again, with the exception of the women in the wilderness, they showed up in the Oley Valley. And in fact, they showed up in the Oley Valley and nowhere else in the case of the newborn. It's not like, and we have a newborn group in Bucks County, and we have it's quite similar to the Burnt Over district, except that some of these were short-lived, and it didn't stay burnt over. It's continued to today.
And also, just for clarification purposes, none of these groups ever, there never was violence that broke out amongst these groups. They all had their differences, of course, and their different interpretations of their faith, but it never got to the point where they were violently attacking each other. They somehow lived peacefully with difference towards each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like one of the newborn tracked down Weiss and punched him for what he said about them. I mean, they just kind of like, well, they were on the way out by then anyway. But I mean, it's not like they really got excited about this stuff. It's, we're getting by. We'll go to church where we can find a church. And apparently there were a lot of options. So.
Well, Karen, it's such a fascinating topic, and it's something I don't think we don't think about it at all anymore. I mean, it's because times have changed so much.
I know.
And if you drive through the Oley Valley today, I mean, you'll see these churches, and you might, oh, that one's Lutheran, oh, that one's UCC, or oh, that, and you don't really give it any thought. But you have to think. What's interesting for me to at least think about this time period is we're talking about the era before any of this was truly established, and it really was. It was, you were walking into the wilderness, the frontier, and this is an era where everybody was of some faith, and faith played a major role in their lives.
It's
in
why
their
they
daily
came to Pennsylvania.
Right, exactly right for a lot of them. And you have to they had those that need in them to fill that desire towards God and towards their fellow man. And it's just really crazy to think about it. You had these areas, particularly here in the Oley Valley and in Berks County on the frontier, where you had to figure out how you were gonna walk this line of faith, and also your neighbors and everybody's a little different from you, and somehow make it all work. It's truly fascinating stuff. And then you got groups like these newborns, which were just like really fringe stuff, man. It's really great. So I
They
want to
just
thank you
pop
so
up
much.
and just
Yeah.
grab people for a while, and then when the leader dies, the successor is kind of like trying to carry on, but really doesn't have the same oomph to 'em.
Charisma. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge about this topic, because it's something, like I said, I would imagine the majority of the people watching the show tonight had never heard of, like, the newborns, for example, or even thought about the fact that we had Quakers in Berks County. I mean, a lot of people don't. Some people know it, of course, but you think of Quakers, like you said, you think of Philadelphia, you think of William Penn and all those guys. But the Quakers were among the Germans here in Pennsylvania Dutch country for sure. So I just want to thank you so much, Karen.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and we all learned a little bit about the Oley Valley, at least from the religious background. And I'm sure I'm not the only one watching tonight or involved in the show that has family ties to some of these names that we said tonight. I mean, these were the original settler families of Berks County. And I have tons of roots that go into the Oley Valley, and I'm sure a lot of other people watching the show do tonight as well. So thank you for telling the story of these people, of our ancestors, and how they tried to get along. Oh, real quick, a question here. This might be interesting. When were the earliest non-Christians there? Do you mean Biot? Can you say, like, do you mean I'm not quite sure what you mean by non-Christian. I mean, I know what non-Christians mean, but if you could clarify that question, maybe, or Karen, do you have an idea of what you might mean?
Well, okay. I mean, the Native Americans were in Berks County at least 12,000 years ago. I mean, oh, okay, Lenape. Yeah, I mean, because I know they have artifacts at the Berks History Center that they found were, let's just say, they were around the same time as Meadowcroft out in western Pennsylvania. The first Jews and Islams, I don't know about the Muslims, probably not until the 20th century. Jews they had in Berks County during the 18th century. They were in Reading. They were merchants. They were identified as Jews on the tax list. I mean, literally, where it has their occupation, they would put Jew.
Yeah.
They were also naturalized.
Yeah.
As part of the I think it was the Plantation Act in 1740. It was a law passed and signed by George II to naturalize these Palatine immigrants to become citizens, in a sense, so they could vote, own land, transfer property, become merchants, etc. And there was one clause in it that allowed Jews to be naturalized as well in the colonies. Now, they didn't want to naturalize them in England because then they would compete against the merchants in London. So it's kind of an interesting dispute there. But there weren't any Jews in the Oley Valley that I'm aware of, but I know there were some in Reading.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. If you have a topic you want to teach us about some other time in the future, just reach out to me and we'll get you back on the show. I'm sure that you have a wealth of things we could talk about in the future for sure.
Well, my research is mostly Berks County history, so.
Oh, perfect. There we go. I love it. I love to hear it.
I'm kind of out of place up here in Mansfield, but I'm close enough that.
All right. You're preaching the gospel up there, though, about the promised land there. In
let's put it this way. When I teach the class, I always have examples from Reading, from Berks County. It's like when I get to the 19th century and they talk about labor strikes. Let me tell you about this railroad strike and how it affected Reading.
Yeah, right.
The 20th century, I talk about the socialists. Well, I see we have an Amish Yoder descendant.
Yeah, right here.
Ruth, a Lutheran Yoder descendant. So
yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And we'll have you back on the show, I'm sure, at some point in the near future.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Merry Christmas and take care.
Okay. Thank you. You too.
Yep. Hey, everybody, how about that? Now you learn a little church history tonight. And the next time you drive through the Oley Valley, I think you'll look at it a little differently. A couple of months ago, we had Tom Stokes on the show, and he took us through the Oley Valley, if you remember. It's a great episode. If you missed it, go back and watch it. It's in the archives there on the YouTube channel that tells the history of the Oley Valley, not from the religious perspective, but from the actual historical perspective of these people that came in, these early families, how they settled the valley, what kind of industry they had, iron ore and iron furnaces, things like that. So check out that episode, and then that ties nicely with what we talked about tonight, because these people all had some kind of faith. And how do you practice your faith when you're living in an area where it's difficult to practice your faith, just because of lack of pastors, like Dr. Guenther said, and how there's all these different groups. So it was really, I find the topic absolutely fascinating. Don't know about you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But we got a couple other things here to go before we close out the show. And every month I bring something Pennsylvania Dutch language related, usually a poem. And this month is no different, as we are getting in that Christmas spirit. This month I bring another poem from one of my favorite poets, John Birmelin, one of the greats among the Pennsylvania Dutch writers, who lived from 1873 until 1950. And this is his poem called Die Kichelcher, which is the little cookies, so to speak. So the Pennsylvania Dutch is on the left-hand side. The right hand's the English. You read whichever language you want to read, and I'm going to read the Pennsylvania Dutch on the left there. Okay, here we go. Die Kichelcher von dem John Birmelin. Sie rollt der Teig dann recht gut aus. Mit Kuchenmodel stecht sie raus. Was sind die Kichelcher so schön? En Deel sind wie ein Haus so glei. En Deel wie ein Hatz, en Deel wie ein Stern. Und Sally ess ich doch so gern. Dann hier und da so ein kleiner Bob mit Katzebä und runder Kopf. Und alles geht zum Ofen nahe. Es scheint der Mem recht heiß zu sein. Sie nimmt die Kuchen wieder raus. Oh, wie riecht's so gut im Haus. Na, guck mal, wie's scheint da draus. Und Grischtdaag ist bald da. Bellschnickel kommt in unser Haus. Was sind wir dann so froh? Der John Birmelin. So there you go. Hopefully you've baked your cookies. I know we did here at my house, and I was eating some today. I'm probably eating way too many of them, but that's okay. We'll go with it. Every month, I also like to bring something musically for all of you guys. And for those of you that follow me on social media and on the YouTube channel, you saw I posted this last week, but not everybody maybe have seen it, so I thought it's a good chance for us to show it again. My good buddy Chris LaRose and I, who we do all of our music together, we took a song, quite popular song known as Mele Kalikimaka, which is the Hawaiian Christmas song, so to speak. And we took it and we made a Pennsylvania Dutch version of it. So I'm going to pull myself out and we're going to listen to this song, and then we'll come back and wrap up the show. Hey, Dutchies, Doug and Chris here. It is the holiday season. I got my Christmas Santa Claus hat on, and we thought we'd give you a little bit of a Christmas treat. How's that sound? What is There's this famous Christmas song called Mele Kalikimaka. It's the Hawaiian Christmas song. Dutch song. Well, I turned it into a PA Dutch song, so we're going to do our version of Mele Kalikimaka, but it's Hallicher Grischtdaag. Oh, boy. That's what we say in Pennsylvania Dutch. Think you can do this, Chris? I hope so. Can you sound Hawaiian? Yeah, all right. Got my ukulele. Got my Santa Claus hat on. All right, here we go. Hallicher Grischtdaag is a thing to say on a PA Dutch Christmas day. That's the Deutsche greeting that we send to you from the land where hex signs play. Here we know the Bellschnickel will visit you. He'll hit you once and give a gift, that's how we do. Hallicher Grischtdaag is the PA Dutch way to say Merry Christmas to you. How about sing one with me? Hallicher Grischtdaag is the thing to say on a PA Dutch Christmas Day. Christmas Day! That's the Deutsche greeting that we send to you from the land where hex signs play. Here we know the Bellschnickel will visit you. He'll hit you once and give a gift, that's how we do. Hallicher Grischtdaag is the PA Dutch way to say Merry Christmas to you. Now everybody
is the thing to say on a PA Dutchy Christmas Day. Christmas Day! That's the Deutsche greeting that we send to you from the land where exiles play. Here we know the Felschnickel will visit you. He'll hit you once and give a gift, that's how we do. Hallicher Grischtdaag is the PA Dutch way to say Merry Christmas to you. To say Merry Christmas to you. Hallicher Grischtdaag, Aliapa. Everybody, Hallicher Grischtdaag.
Well, how about that, people? How about a little bit of Hallicher Grischtdaag? I hope you enjoyed that. We had fun making that song. That's the kind of silly stuff we like to do. Just, make things as Pennsylvania Dutch as possible. I changed hats because it's Christmas. It's Santa Claus hat time. And here, as we close up the show, just a couple more things real quick for you. If you're still looking, it's probably too late to order to get in time for Christmas. But as you look into the new year, if you'd like to get your own Pennsylvania Dutch merch, you can if you visit our shop, Zazzle.com/PA Dutch 101, where you can get tons of cool things like shirts that say things like this, Out in the Light or Schnickel Fritz. And we got tons of other things too. We have shirts, we have stickers, we have magnets. You can get a magnet for your back of your car that says I brake for hex signs, or a sticker for your car like that. Oh, you can get one for your refrigerator that says Ich bin Deutsch. Tons of great stuff. So check out our website, Zazzle.com/PA Dutch 101 to get all of your Pennsylvania Dutch themed merch. Also, if you'd like to financially support what we do here because you value what we do here on the channel and all of the other stuff that we're doing to preserve and tell the story of the Pennsylvania Dutch, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Doug Maidenford, or you can become a monthly patron on our Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/PA Dutch 101. All and any donations given are greatly appreciated. I'd like to give a shout out to some people that have been financially supporting us. Großdank für die Unterstützung, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch. Big thanks for your support. Gary and Deanna Weaver, Nathan Seeger, Seth Moak, Norman Young, Randy S., Ron Griffith, Glenn Ritter, David Hunsinger, Dolly Moyer, Gary Johansson, Gail Spilsbury, Bill Nace, Susan Thomas, Tanya, Big Z2, Leoso, Lenora Holt, Cayenne Janukowski, and Thomas Finnegan. Thank you so much, all of you, for your financial support and your support overall to help us keep the lights on here at PA Dutch 101. Mark your calendars, dear friends, because our next episode will be in the new year, January 22nd. It's a Wednesday night at 6 p.m. We're going to be welcoming Joseph Smith on, and he is going to be telling us all about the Swiss settlers of Pennsylvania. For a lot of our episodes, we talk about the Pennsylvania Dutch, and everybody always thinks it was just the Germans that came. Well, there was a large percentage of Swiss that came to Pennsylvania at the same time as, with the Pennsylvania Dutch. And he's going to be telling us about the Swiss connections, and a little bit about, how are the Swiss different from the people coming from the Palatinate, for example, or how were they different from the people coming from Hessen? And it's going to be a really interesting conversation with Joseph. He's the president of an organization that celebrates the heritage of the Swiss settlers to Pennsylvania. He'll be telling us about his group and also the history associated with that immigrant group. And I'm sure a lot of you watching tonight are descendants of Swiss settlers. I am, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So mark your calendar, January 22nd, 2025. We got a lot of great shows planned already in the new year. There's our January episode. We're going to be welcoming Candace Perry back in February, I believe, and we got other shows lined up. There's going to be some great guests coming down the pipeline in the new year. Dear friends, as we close out here, I just want to wish all of you a Hallicher Grischtdaag. If you celebrate, Merry Christmas. If you celebrate something else, happy whatever that is. And as we look to the new year, Halliches Najor, I can't believe 24 is over, but as we look to the new year, I wish all of you a very blessed, safe, healthy, prosperous 2025, and we'll keep bringing all of the quality Pennsylvania Dutch content that we do here at the channel and over on our social media feeds on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Please follow along. If you're on any of those sites, just look for PA Dutch 101. I want to thank you for another awesome year as we close the year here out, and for all of your support, whether it's financially or just the great comments that you guys always leave on the posts that we put out there on our social media accounts. Thank you. Gross Dank. We'll keep that content coming throughout the new year. I just want to say, again, I can't say thank you enough, because I truly love all of you out there, and for the love that you show for us and what we're doing here at the channel. Myself, my wife and kids who support me in all of this, my family, and our good friend Chris, who we saw in the music video. Without all of their support, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do, and hopefully help bring joy and knowledge and education to all of you out there. So thank you for your continued support. Hallicher Grischtdaag, Halliches Neujahr, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everyone, and I will see you all next year. Mach's gut.
Mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir for now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so es ist, mach's gut for now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir for now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so es ist, mach's gut for now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Und so mach's gut, lieber Freund, mach's gut.